everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Blind Spot Project. This is the series where we are talking about movies that we haven't seen before. We have two critics who are here talking about some fun Halloween movies. Happy Halloween. This is going to air on Halloween.
Yay!
So, hey, happy Halloween.
Woo!
I am film critic Rachel Wagner. Amanda's here.
Hi, good to be back.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, my favorite holiday. It's my
Ah,
favorite month. It's my favorite everything. I'm so
do you,
happy.
do you have a costume plan this year?
I do. I do.
What's your costume?
Well, I was gonna be Glinda for Wicked, but then I wasn't going anywhere, so I'm like I'm not gonna, spend on a costume and not go anywhere. So I
Uh-huh.
did a makeshift costume of Sophia Falcone from The Penguin, which is the rave right now for
Oh,
like
that
DC
show.
Comics and everything, that show. So I'm like, you know what? I put a little thing together and it's relevant, it's recent. So I'm like, let's
Yeah.
try that.
Well, my
Have we
friend, my friend Jax is coming into town for a visit, so I'm really
nice.
excited for that. Yeah, and so we decided because we host on stage blog podcasts. We're both big theater people, and so we thought we'd do a theater themed podcast. I mean, we thought we'd do a theater themed costume. And of course, I thought about Wicked. I'm like, that would be too expensive. And one of us would have to get all green, and that would be a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
So we came up with something I think kind of clever. Um, so we are going to be Dear Evan Hansen, both of us, and one of us will be Angel, Dear Evan Hansen, and one of us will be the devil, Dear Evan Hansen.
That's
So
hilarious.
it's gonna
I
be fun.
love that costume so much. Oh my God. That's amazing. All the
So
theater kids are gonna be like,
yeah.
yes, give your flowers.
We got the
I
cast, we've got the shirt, the whole thing. So it'll be really fun.
I love that. That's so good.
But I do also love Halloween. Of course, it's not as beloved to me as Christmas, and I'm the Christmas girl, but I do really
Yeah,
enjoy it. And I think the Halloween it's such a fun holiday for creativity. Like you
it
really
is.
can go for it.
Yeah, I love it. And you just get to try different things. Like I did my makeup totally different for Sophia. Like it's really fun. You can do wigs, you can do different costumes. But even
Yeah.
just like, I don't know, I just feel like the whole spookiness of it, the whole month. It starts like September
Yeah.
1st for me, realistically. Like I celebrate this for 2 months because I watch horror movies like the entire time. So it's just the whole season, Thanksgiving for us because I'm
Yeah.
Canadian too. So the fall vibes just give me a different sense of like comfort.
Well, it's interesting too, this blind spot because but probably my biggest blind spot going into this project was a lot of like horror, just because I just
Yeah.
had been a wimp for so long. And and so I've watched quite a few of the classic horror movies as
Love
part
it.
of this project over the years. I've seen Nightmare on Elm Street. I've seen the John Carpenter's Halloween. I've seen Scream.
Hmm.
Quite a few of those franchise starters, at least that I've seen, which
And the
is
thing
fun.
is, especially for I don't know which order like you watch them in, but for
Yeah.
me, Scream has always been like a good like let's dip your toes into horror. Like
Yeah.
that was
That was
my
one of the
first
early
introduction.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always recommend that one first if people are kind of, apprehensive about watching these horror films. It's always Scream because
Yeah.
it just goes through the conventions and tells you what's about to happen too, so it's not as
Yeah.
scary. But yeah, I love that you're getting into horror. By the time you're like, by me, like it's been 5 years that I've been doing this like every September and October. I'm so numb. Nothing scares me.
Well,
Nothing.
it's one thing
Okay.
I realized is that for me, I think that the stuff that actually scares me is stuff that
Mm.
feels like a little bit realistic. So something that just
Yeah.
feels like a total fantasy, it's supernatural, or something like that usually doesn't scare me. I can
Yeah.
kind of
I'm the
separate
same.
myself from it.
Same. I
And
can appreciate it. Yeah.
yeah. And so like something like The Thing, we'll talk about, it has scary moments. It certainly is gross, but
Mhm.
it's not really the kind of thing that'll give me nightmares, because
Yeah.
I'm more likely to have nightmares about about something like for instance, this year, did you see Skincare?
No, but I've really wanted to watch that. I missed out.
Yeah, it didn't quite come together for me, but
Hmm.
it was pretty scary for me because it's all about this woman getting stalked both online and in life, and so that to me is like
Yeah.
scarier than
Hmm.
Freddy Krueger coming in someone's dream. Like that's,
No,
you know,
100%. I felt that way with Mike Flanagan's Hush, which is streaming on Netflix, and it's about a woman who lives in this like glass house, and she's deaf and mute. So there was an intruder, and then you're just watching her trying to figure out how to get out of this house with the intruder there, but she can't hear and she can't speak. So it
mhm.
was just that was so interesting. I love Mike Flanagan. If you haven't like watched his stuff, I highly recommend it too for future because he's really, really good. But it's
Yeah.
very realistic, especially being women. You're like, I don't want to watch something like this, please. Like it's
Yeah,
scary.
like I'm not watching something like Terrifier 3 or something, like that's ridiculous, too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, way too much. I watched the second one
You have to
because
know
I
your
was like,
limits.
yeah, it's like I'm okay. You guys can appreciate this stuff. I don't need to watch it. I'm fine. Like
Yeah.
I will never watch The Ring. I refuse to watch The
Oh,
Ring. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to handle it now as an adult, but like absolutely not watching The Ring whatsoever.
I have seen The Ring. So that was like super popular when I was in college when it came
Yeah.
out. It was really, really popular, and it was, I think, I mean, I haven't watched it since college. It'd be fun to revisit it because
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in so long. But it was
Mhm.
definitely. I mean, I remember watching it actually with my friends, and and like just as I think it was just as we were finishing, we got a phone call, and all of us were like,
Oh no.
back
Oh,
in the
I
day when
get
you had a
it.
landline phone,
Yeah,
how
honestly,
old I am.
the rings hit different because even in like Scream, when you hear that, like you hear that phone ring, you're like, oh my God, like what? This exists still? Because everyone has their phone on silent now. So you can't
Yeah,
even like get a call. But yeah, that's funny. I get it. I
yeah.
mean, when it came out, because like I don't do clowns at all. And
Oh,
then I went to go watch it and it was terrifying. I had nightmares of Pennywise. I literally had nightmares of
oh
Pennywise.
yeah.
And I didn't expect that either because it's like you can't really do anything. But that movie just terrified me.
Have you seen Smile 2 yet?
Not yet, but I'm dying to
Oh,
go see it. I liked the first one. I thought it was
I
pretty
did
like
too.
fine. But yeah, I've been dying to watch the second one.
I didn't see the first one until the day before, watching the
Oh
sequel.
wow.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It was one I missed, and I really appreciated that the original had like a grounded feel to it,
Hmm.
and was kind of trying to address like themes of mental illness and trauma and these things. Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies. It's maybe I'm contradicting myself saying I appreciated it felt more real, and but it still had enough sort of like implausibility, this curse and everything, that it wasn't
Mm.
that scary. But the second one was just insane.
Oh my
I
God.
had a blast. I was sitting there and in the theater and I was just squirming. I'm like, ah.
That's the best because like you're just sitting there, you have no idea what to expect at all, and then they keep
Yeah.
going at
Like
it. Like,
it's not one of like the best movies of the year or anything, but as far as just like the most fun that I had, it's
I
up
love
there.
that. I love
It
it.
was really fun. So,
I can't wait. I'm gonna try to squeeze it in this weekend.
oh man, you have to let me know what you think.
I
Well,
will.
Today we are talking about two films from John Carpenter. Talking about The Thing, and we're talking about vampires. And what's interesting, John Carpenter is a pretty interesting filmmaker. He has made, it has 33 films he's directed on his IMDb. I think some of those are like shorts and some of them are like documentaries and things like that. But so I don't know how many actual like features, but of those 33. But anyway, so I've seen 4 of his movies. I've seen I've seen The Thing, I've seen Vampires, I've seen Halloween, and I've seen Big Trouble in Little China. And I would like all 4. That's pretty rare for a director to have a 4 hit streak, at least for me. And I know he has his duds, but
Yeah.
he is a pretty, I think, consistent director.
I think he is. I really do agree with that. I think that he knows the style that he wants depending on the genre. I think that he delivers on like body horror and incredible practical effects.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like pull back from the kills, which we saw in Vampires and The Thing as well. Like I was blown away that the fact that, especially at the time that these films came out, it's like, whoa, they're actually showing that in that way. And I think the kills, they're very unique to Carpenter in that way. But I just think that even score wise, like, that it's a John Carpenter film based on like his composition and the score too, because it's just iconic. So I think that run is like unique to his vision as like a horror director, and just even tapping into different genres. I think it's amazing that he fuses that together.
Yeah, and what really impressed me about especially the 3 horror, not as much Big Trouble in Little China, but what really impressed me about those 3 horror movies is that he is really good at keeping things very simple.
Yes.
That all the 3 movies, The Thing, Vampires, and Halloween, are very simple premises, and he doesn't muddle them all up. And and you're in and out and you're on with your life. And I appreciate that a lot.
It's true. And I think even if you look at the run times for each of the films, they're all like had an issue with vampires, but it's fine. But with The Thing and Halloween, I think that the pacing's really good because he just continuously builds the suspense and the anticipation for what the killer is going to do next. And I just think that it's really strong work from him. Yeah. I love that.
Even Vampires has its weaknesses, and it's definitely the weakest of those 3. Yeah. It's still relatively simple.
It is. And I think that he just doesn't waste anyone's time, which, is amazing. And he doesn't overdo it at all. Like even the kills, he doesn't overdo. And I think that because it's so simple, as you're saying, Rachel, when the kills do happen, you're like in shock that it's even happening because of how like simplistic the story is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I agree. Well, let's talk about The Thing first. Let's see here. I want to see. Yeah, all 3 of those horror movies are all under 2 hours, which is a rarity these days.
Yeah, that's true. I don't get it. I'm like, y'all can cut down. What are you keeping certain things in for? Come on.
Yeah, it's like when the second Venom movie came out, and people were like, "Oh, it's too short." I'm like, "What's wrong with you? Like,
right." I'm like, you guys are crying over this. You guys cry
like it's great. That's a check in its favor. As far as I'm concerned.
Straight to the point. We had a blasty blast. Like, what do you need?
Especially comic book movies are so bloated these days. Like they are just too long.
It's true
for the most part.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the good folks at Harpthread Press and Lindsay Gibson and her new book, The Christmas Coin. Professional ballet dancer Amelia Collins is blindsided when an accident causes a career-ending injury. With no other options but to start over, she leaves city life behind to remodel a country home in the quaint village of Whitebridge, Connecticut. Running on nothing but hope, she moves in only weeks before Christmas. Then she discovers an old European coin with a story while loading some boxes into her attic. A story that might upend everything, especially when single dad Benjamin Walsh finds out about it, and when she learns he's in charge of her remodel. She isn't quite sure how the holiday will go. You can find out more about the Christmas coin and all the great books from Harper's Road at harpersroad.com. You can purchase the Christmas coin wherever you do your holiday book shopping, or you can use the affiliate link below. That's The Christmas Coin by Lindsay Gibson. We know you'll love it. Anyway, so let's talk about The Thing. And so this movie, it's really interesting because it was not received well upon release. It did get a thumbs up from Siskel, but not Ebert. Yeah, he thought the characters were probably too simple. He talks about it in his review. But yeah, it didn't get good reviews at the time when it came out, but it's since been kind of re-examined, and it's certainly I think you could say it's somewhat of a cult classic.
Oh, definitely. I think, but the way people talk about Halloween versus how they talk about The Thing, like it's just very different. But the only reason I even watched it is because people were telling me like this is one of his best, and like I just never got around to watching it until like last year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's a research team in Antarctica is hunted by a shape-shifting alien that assumes the appearance of its victims. And director John Carpenter, writers Bill Lancaster and John W. Campbell. And it stars Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, Keith David. So how did you feel about it? You finally got a chance to watch it. You'd heard all this praise. What did you think of The Thing?
I always like, I'm so apprehensive going into like these films that everyone regards as like, oh, it's the very best. Like even watching like Apocalypse Now again and watching Gladiator for the first time, like a couple years ago, since I was a kid, like you don't remember certain things. It's hard because like you really want to love it because everyone else is like saying it's amazing. But I was so locked in with The Thing the second it started to the very end. Like I watched it pitch black in my basement. Like I was locked in from the very beginning because I'm such a huge Halloween fan that I really wanted to love The Thing. And then it just exceeded expectations. And now I understand why people love it, especially because, you know, like Kurt Russell's so badass in this movie. He's so cool. And then just the concept of the actual alien, like turning into people, and then you don't know who to trust on the rest of the crew. Like I thought that was genius, and it was so simple one by one. Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying, and that's been one of the interesting things about the Blind Spot series is that is you know, approaching these classics that people love, and you know, some of them I haven't loved, especially like 80s comedies. I have not been a fan of. There are very few that I've liked, and you know, it's just my opinion, but
they're a bit rough. I won't lie to you. I get
it. People get really upset that I didn't like Troop Beverly Hills or Lethal Weapon or Beverly Hills Cop. I didn't like that, and I just not for me.
It's like, it's okay, you guys can like them, you know, I don't have to.
Yeah. And so it is a tricky thing, but yeah, I think this is really, really effective. And you know, it's interesting to listen to Ebert's review because a lot of the things that he talks about as being a problem, like the characters being simplistic and not well developed, things like that, I actually think help the movie because I think that as far as the characters, I don't know. I think that keeping it like simple, again, going back to what we were talking about, and not having like tons of exposition to building up these characters where it's just like man versus beast, I think actually kind of helps the pacing and the scares and the thing than if they did it another way.
I mean, I agree. I think that it's more of like an ensemble piece with obviously certain people getting a bit more of a spotlight. I get that, but it's the fact that all of them banding together, they're bonding over the situation at the same time. And honestly, if you do like an exposition heavy, like backstory on certain people, they're gonna die anyway. They're gonna kill. So they're gonna get killed. So I think doing it as like a group
Yeah,
situation and
group.
like a
That's
group thing versus like this individual man is going to be the last one standing. You really didn't know who the hell was going to like be the last one standing at the end of this, and I thought that was even more effective too.
yeah. And so again, it's like so it again, it's a very simple movie. What's interesting too is that so this one does not have a John Carpenter score.
Hmm.
It's the score in this one is by Ennio Morricone, who's a legend, of course.
Love him.
But I guess it was kind of a perilous relationship between them uh, because they wanted it to sound more like a John Carpenter score, and then he got more and more kind of frustrated. And what's really surprising to me is that I guess the score was not well received. In fact, it was nominated for a Razzie for worst score, which is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I mean, it's still Ennio. Like, it's still Ennio
Yeah,
Morricone. Like, how are you nominating him for a Razzie? That's actually crazy.
yeah.
That's nuts.
And it says here, so says Morricone did all the orchestrations and recorded for me 20 minutes of music I could use whenever I wished, but without seeing any footage. I cut his music into the film and realized that there were places, mostly scenes of tension, in which his music would not work. I secretly ran off and recorded in a couple of days a few pieces to use. My pieces were very simple electronic pieces. It was almost tones. It was not really music at all, but just background sounds. Something today you might even consider as sound effects. So
Wow.
that's kind of interesting. And
That is
Morricone
interesting.
said, I've asked Carpenter as he was preparing some electronic musics with an assistant to edit on the film, why did you call me if you want to do it on your own? He surprised me. He said, I got married to your music. This is why I've called you. Then when
Oh.
he showed me the film later when I wrote the music, we didn't exchange ideas. He ran away, nearly ashamed of showing it to me. I wrote the music on my own without his advice. Naturally, as I had become quite clever since 1982, I've written several scores relating to my life, and I had written one which was electronic music, and Carpenter took the electronic score. So this is always interesting to hear that kind of backstory.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I didn't expect that at all. I thought like it was just very amicable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that Morricone produced a score of approximately 1 hour that remained largely unused, but was later released as part of the film's soundtrack. So anyway, that it sounds kind of so that it was kind of crazy, which is
Jeez,
interesting.
John Carpenter. Come on, man.
And of course, Kurt Russell would collaborate with John Carpenter on a number of other projects, including Big Trouble Little China and
Mm.
Escape from New York and all of that, or Escape from LA. Um, what did you think of him as sort of the leader of this group of
I thought he
scientists?
was great. I always say I think he's a very underappreciated like actor. I think he's really strong. And I liked his character. I think he was just very cool. Like he's one of the coolest characters like on screen that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked him a
Yeah,
lot.
he was super good. Like if only all scientists were like
Right?
Kurt Russell.
You're just like it's so weird. It's like he didn't look like a scientist, but you know what? He's a badass. Like he really is. He's really cool and he's very calm and collected until obviously he
Yeah.
doesn't need to be. But I thought it was great. He just has a really amazing screen presence. And I don't think people recognize that sometimes. It was really cool. I mean, he's Santa Claus, guys. Like he's Santa Claus in the Christmas
Yeah,
Chronicles
he's
too.
Santa Claus.
Okay? He's like the coolest Santa Claus. I don't want to get into Christmas, but I just had to bring that up. He's the coolest Santa
Yeah, I saw a
Claus.
thing the other day. It was like, when did the tough guy to Santa Claus transition start? Because they had J.K. Simmons, they had Kurt Russell, and they had Mel
Right.
Gibson, all things, which is funny.
Like badasses.
So there's at the beginning of the movie there this helicopter blows up, and then they have this, there's this body and this dog with them, and as they start to kind of it start to kind of do this autopsy. There's this guy Blair, played Wilford Brimley, he's doing this autopsy. He's like, this has normal organs, but it's this, but it's not exactly human. It's like kind of human. It's,
It's
and
so weird.
yeah, and then the dog, if they think it's just a normal dog, and it starts to transform, and it's pretty gnarly.
That completely floored me. I'm like, not the dog. I was like, okay, y'all really just throwing us all for a loop at this point. It was
Mhm.
incredible. That autopsy, like it was just such a good scene. It
Yeah.
was so good.
And each you kind of wait, like check for
Mm.
each of the characters to get us get assimilated. They each kind of have their moment. And so it starts out with this guy Bennings, and he gets assimilated, and they end up burning him, and it was pretty intense. That uh, like each time someone's assimilated, it's pretty intense. It's pretty gross.
It's so gross. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No one does it now. Everyone's so scared
Yeah.
to show transformation. I think that's why I love The Substance so much, because it's like, you know what? Let's just throw it all out there. Let's just get
Mm,
into it. And I know that's not for everybody. I know body horror is not for everybody, but I just think that those level of transformations, I love it because it
yeah.
feels authentic. It feels real within the world that they're creating. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's so important about that.
I agree. I agree. And
Yeah.
they end up sending Wilford Brimley's character Blair to the shed,
So,
and that's just creepy when he's out there. And you're
right?
like, oh my gosh, what's he like? I think it does a really good job of keeping you on edge.
It
Because I
does
think,
the whole
especially because
time.
this is like an environment we aren't familiar with. We don't, we don't, it's not like a typical place to have a horror movie set.
It isn't. And it's like out in the open. It's in the winter. Like it's full on snowing. And it's just, I
Yeah.
think that, oh, it's just the setting, it was so impactful. And you don't even realize that it is. But like they did so much with it. And even like with the flamethrowers, like offsetting, like during a time that it's so cold and you're like, okay, we're gonna burn this person to a crisp. Like it was just visually all of it tied in together. And then once you get outside, which is, I'm pretty sure it was towards the end, if I
Hmm.
remember. Yeah, I don't want to get into that. But anyways, once you get outside, it's just the atmosphere is so cool and he
Yeah.
utilizes it so well.
So this was filmed in 1981 in Juneau, Alaska. The
Nice.
the filming lasted 12 weeks. Carpenter insisted on 2 weeks of rehearsals before filming, as he wanted to see how scenes would play out. This was unusual at the time because of the expanse involved.
Hmm.
And then they filming moved to the Universal lot, where the outside heat was over 100 degrees. The internal sets were climate controlled to 28 degrees to facilitate their work. The team considered building the sets inside an existing refrigerated structure, but were unable to find one large enough. Instead, they collected as many portable air conditioners as they could, closed off the stage, and used humidifiers and misters to add moisture to the air. So that's pretty fun.
Whoa. That's so cool because you can kind of sense that in certain scenes, especially in where they were staying. You could see like it was kind of like misty at the same time. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
That's so cool. I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, the Wikipedia on this movie is very in depth and very uh
Mm.
very thorough. So if you I mean there we could go on, there's paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs about casting, writing, every element. So if you're a
That's
fan of
so
this
sick.
movie, it's I know some people, you kind of look skew at Wikipedia, but for some things it's a pretty good resource,
It's
and they have all of their
information.
references cited. So if you want to check it out, you can. But anyway,
Yeah,
it's a very good it's a very good Wikipedia entry on this
it
movie.
is.
Yeah.
I'm scrolling too, like while I was like, oh my God, there's so much.
Yeah. And so this movie was also the lighting was and the cinematography by Dean Cundey, and he is so good. And he is like a legend of cinematography. Worked with John Carpenter, Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis. He's incredible. He worked with Botten to determine the appropriate lighting for each creature. He wanted to show off that Botten is the guy who made the creatures off Botten's
Yeah.
work because of its details, but he was conscious that showing too much would reveal its artificial nature, breaking the illusion. Each encounter with the creature was planned for areas where they could justify using a series of small lights to highlight the particular creature's surface and textures. Cundey would illuminate the area behind the creature to detail its overall shape. And which I know, I just thought that's really interesting.
That's amazing. You know how
Yeah.
meticulous you have to be to like place those light. Oh my God. And not once did I think that it was like artificial, that it wasn't
No,
real.
no.
I have to admit, like they did a really good, knowing that, I'm like, kudos to you. Claps to you guys because that effective, honestly. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And he says he wanted to try filming the creature at fast and slow speeds, thinking this would create a more interesting visual effect, but they were unable to accomplish this at the time. For the rest of the set, Cundey created a contrast by lighting the interiors with warmer lights hung overhead in conical shades so that they could still control the lighting and have darkened areas on set. The outside was constantly bathed in a cold blue light that Cundey had discovered being used in airport runways. The reflective surface of the snow and the blue light helped create the impression of coldness. The team
Yeah.
also made use of flamethrowers and magenta-hued flares used by the actors to create dynamic lighting.
Geniuses.
Yeah.
All of them. That's so cool. I love that. These
Yeah.
tidbits are awesome, Rachel. This is great.
Yeah, I mean it's just amazing how much thought goes in to something you don't think of. I mean, you don't think about it. It's like they say you only notice the craft service table in the shot or the boom mic in the shot in a bad movie.
Yeah.
And that's true. Like if you're completely invested, like you don't notice, oh, like that was a little error, that was a little thing. And so,
Yeah.
but it's just incredible all the different pieces that go into making an effective film work.
It's amazing. And honestly, like you going through this list, there's at least 80% of films that come out right now that aren't even like conscious of the lighting and what they can do with it and utilize
Yeah.
certain things that they have on hand. So it's incredible that a movie that came out in what was it, 86 that you said?
Uh,
I think.
eight, no,
Sorry.
it
Was
came
there
out in
what
82.
is it? 82, I
82.
lied.
Yeah.
Yeah, a movie that came out in 82 did something so incredible like this. So I just, I when people say, "Oh, I don't watch," there was a tweet going around and they're like, "I don't watch movies like past a certain
Oh,
like
I know. Oh
time."
my
And I'm
gosh.
like, "Y'all are missing out. There's some bangers. There's like 100% bangers from like the 50s till now that you're missing out. I don't understand
Yeah.
what you guys are doing. Like, don't say that." So, like, because it's quality. It's quality at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And one of the most effective scenes I think in the movie is when they're testing the blood.
Ooh, yeah.
That
That
is really, really
one.
good. And
That was so
and
cool.
when the one blood is bouncy, and so they know. And then Palmer, he doesn't. The blood,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like bouncy. I can't think of it.
I just love that the audience also knows with the characters.
Yeah.
It's not like we're finding out at a different time. We're finding out with them, and I think that's what makes it even more like scary at the same time.
Yeah. And so then that's when we get the Palmer thing, and then he ends up taking out Windows, this character named
Yeah.
Windows. And so then McCready has to incinerate both of them. And
Mm.
I mean they had a lot of fire flamethrower
They
incinerator
did. It was so
in this
fun.
in this station. I
It
have a
was so
feeling
fun.
that not the average Antarctica scientist station has this much flamethrower.
No. They're like, you know what's cool, guys, in this movie? A flamethrower. No one ever uses a flamethrower, so we're gonna use flamethrowers, and that's literally why they threw them in there. It was cool.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and I liked the fact that each of the creatures was so different. You can tell that this guy, what is his name, Bolton. You can tell that he really spent a lot of time, and like the fact that the one of them looks like a weird spider.
I
Oh
know,
my
and I don't like
gosh, like that's
spiders. Ooh, I couldn't watch that part. I was like, not the spiders. What do you mean? Why did you make it so gross? I couldn't deal with. I had to cover
Yeah.
my when I got so squeamish. I'm like, bleh. I'm like, I can't do it.
And so then, so I mean, obviously you have to take a lot of leaps, but I do think it was maybe even a little bit too far to believe that Blair made this flying saucer in like a day. Like, how did he?
I know. I know. I was just like, it's out of convenience. Who can see that happening? How else are we
How did he
gonna?
have all those pieces? And how did he like? How did he? But he makes this flying saucer. Uh,
That's so
and
funny.
you know they say so it ends up being McCready and Childs, so that's Keith David and Kurt Russell, and Keith
Hmm.
David I think is great in this. I think he's
Yes, I
really
like him a
good.
lot.
Yeah,
I like him a lot.
yeah. And he says that we're not getting out of this thing alive, are we? You know, and
It's like,
so they're like,
well,
we we can't let the thing freeze again, and so they blow up the shed and they blow up the
such a good
station.
scene.
And the final scene of the movie is McCready and Childs drinking whiskey and waiting to die.
I
So
love it. I love it because you know the inevitable's coming. Like there was
yeah,
no reason to even like show that too, but like that last scene is iconic. It's
yeah,
so cool. I
it's really
love them
good.
together.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
Let's talk about vampires. So this movie, it came out in 1998, so this is a pretty big leap. And for as far as timing for John Carpenter, it's written by John Steaky and Don Jacoby. And James Woods, Daniel Baldwin, Cheryl Lee, recovering from an ambush that killed his entire team, a vengeful vampire slayer must retrieve an ancient Catholic relic that, should it be acquired by vampires, will allow them to walk in sunlight. So it sounds like you weren't as high on this one.
I think for me, like I love the beginning. I love everything with Valak. I love the kills were fantastic. The whole Western aspect I really liked that it tied in, and it reminded me of Ryan Coogler's Sinners because it's a new movie coming out next year with
Oh,
Michael B. Jordan who plays twins actually, and one set is a vampire. So I think watching this one from Carpenter, I was like, oh, like Coogler really pulled different things out of like for a Western. It was just similar style elements that I noticed. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm happy I watched vampires, but for me, it was just a bit repetitive and the pacing in the second half is not as strong as the first half for me personally because it slowed down a bit. But I did enjoy what Carpenter did with it. I thought it was unique for,
yeah.
the supernatural creature for sure.
I think overall it's a pretty fun time for what it's trying to
Yeah.
be. But I do agree that the main problem with the movie is that this relationship between Daniel Baldwin and a character in this, Katrina,
Yeah.
is hard to get invested in. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that he would give everything for her and that he loves her so much. I'm like, you just met her. And Cheryl
Right.
Lee is Katrina.
Yeah.
And the fact that, I mean, Daniel Baldwin's character, Anthony is his name, that he would make such stupid decisions over and over again. He knows this woman has been bit, and yet he's literally like leaning over her multiple times. He's right next to her on the bed, like multiple times. You know, you're just like, come on, you wouldn't be that stupid.
No. And like no matter how much you love the person, but I think for me like they didn't even utilize like vampire powers for Katrina because let's just say the only reason why, Anthony was so like invested is because like she had him under her spell because like some vampires do that as well. Like they could have tapped into that and I would have been like a bit more sold, but it's like their connection wasn't believable because they didn't lean into the power set that she would have other than her
That's
having a
true.
link to Valak, right? So again, it's like
Yeah,
it's
you're supposed to believe that he's just so in love with her.
Yeah, it's like, well, is she a full-blown vampire with actual
No.
powers? Like, what is she here? Is she other than just like a kind of prop in the middle to put them both together? That's the only reason why she exists. Because
Not
the
until
second,
later. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like
Yeah.
that whole middle portion was a bit muddled for me, for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a pretty bloody movie. I mean, that scene where the priest gets his head ripped off is pretty gnarly.
Amazing. No, literally amazing. The whole thing. Every single kill, I was like, what this meant. Valak comes in with these nails and he's like swiping everyone and the heads off and this guy in half. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I was sold in that moment.
Yeah.
It's like, because you don't see vampires like that either half the time.
Yeah. Well, and I do think James Woods has like major swagger in this.
Oh yeah. Those
He's
sunglasses?
yeah.
Top notch.
Yeah, I was trying to think if they were going to remake this movie, who would be the James Woods of now?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, he has great hair. So I'm trying to think of someone with great hair. Um, oh man. I mean, no, Miles Teller couldn't do it.
Hmm.
He could. I feel like he
Miles
could have
Teller,
the
I don't
swag.
really see that like the confidence. I mean, I don't know. Is Glenn Powell, is he too pretty?
I was thinking about him. Okay, I was thinking about him. I didn't say it because I'm like, it was the best answer to say.
Do you
Of
need
course you're
somebody
gonna
who's
give
a little
it.
bit more like rough
I
around
think
the edges?
yeah, you need someone who's a bit more like not that Glenn's not like a bit rugged, but like James Woods is like down and dirty type of person.
Yeah.
That's tough. I'm trying to think of who else now. I mean, Sebastian Stan would be fun. I think he could rock that.
Oh, I could see
Seb could
that.
rock that. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see
That'd
that.
be cool. I think he'd have fun with this role for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting that both of these movies that we're talking about, they had actors who played Disney villains. You know, so
That's
Keith David
right.
was Dr. Facilier and James Woods, of course,
I love that.
was Hades. So that's funny. But yeah, I mean, this movie, you're kind of along for the road trip of it. As they starts out with this big party, this vampire party, and they dispose of 9 of the vampires at the party, but there's still the head, the master, and this Valak. And that's when the girlfriend gets bitten, and like I said, the Daniel Baldwin Anthony, that he just kept making such stupid decisions, and the only explanation given is that he's in love. It's like he's like a professional vampire, and especially in contrast to James Woods, like he killed his own father when his father turned.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so.
It's just
And
interesting.
the scene with the priest on the elevator with the vampire, that was a really good scene. I thought that was really
Amazing.
good.
Just everything was amazing. Like
The
even
other
the
thing is,
vampires.
I was kind of like, why are they shooting them? That does nothing. It doesn't stop them at all. Like,
I know.
It's just kind of like after a while, you would just stop.
Yeah.
It
The whole
has-
shootout in like the beginning, I'm like, but you guys are vampire hunters. Why are you shooting them with gun? Like, I'm not understanding. Are there special bullets? Because like I watched 15 seasons of Supernatural to know like what kills what.
Yeah, wasn't it
Supernatural,
silver?
dude.
Isn't it bullets made out of silver or something?
Yeah, it's that
Yeah.
literally, or like a wooden stake. Everyone knows it's a wooden stake to the heart. Like it was just, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it's
And the hello, Jack and Alec. That was good.
It's so cheesy. It's
Yeah.
so cheesy at the same time. It's a typical 90s movie. I think that's what I really enjoyed of it. Like I had
Yeah,
to say that
I
it's a
agree.
90s movie. So you just got to enjoy
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah. And then so she bites Billy. I mean, so she bites Anthony because he's being so stupid, and he's going to be turned eventually because of it. And then there's this whole character named Cardinal Alba, who's a little bit undercooked. Like
Yeah.
he is like an ally of Valak, and he turns on the priest, and so this who ends up shooting him, and there's sort of this back and forth with Cardinal Alba.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that again, like,
Yeah.
because that was the second half of the film. I was like, I wasn't buying it, you know? They just had to add another link, I guess, because the girl wasn't working, clearly. But like,
Right. And so Jack ends up is kind of tricking Valak, so he ends up in the sun, and that was pretty effective, and he ends up killing Valak. And then basically he gives Anthony 2 days head start because he had been such a loyal friend to him. But he's like, I will kill you.
I will kill you.
Yeah, I will kill you eventually. So him and Katrina are off. And I mean, I would say that's pretty irresponsible of Jack, because they could kill a lot of people.
They could, but
I mean, he shot his own, I mean, he killed his own father. So
choices, man, choices. It doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. So I had a pretty good time with this, but obviously the thing is the stronger film. And I would say too that if you're looking for a sort of a campy vampire story, I do think the Lost Boys is a better movie. And that's from the 80s, so it was before this, but I do think that's a better movie with very similar ideas.
I still have to watch that.
And style.
That's been on my list for an eternity, and I've never gotten around to it. So you saying that
really
is
good. Yeah.
Yeah, you saying that, I'm like sold. Okay, that's definitely added to the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there we go. That is Vampires and the Thing. Wait, let us know what you think of both these movies. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section or on Twitter. I'll be writing up my review for both of them, so I'll put a link to that. And Manda, where can people find you?
You guys can always follow me over at AMXND Reviews on Twitter, and you can check out my website, candidxcinema.com, and my YouTube, Candid Cinema.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure that you are following everything going on over Hallmarkies Podcast. We got a lot of fun content over there. And if you're listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. Appreciate that so much. Also, if you are watching here on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. Also have the Patreon group, which is the biggest way you can support us, and we have really fun opportunities. You're part of watch-alongs with talent, and it's a good time. So check that out. And we have the merch store where we have a bunch of new holiday themed merch. We've got Home Alone, we got Die Hard, we've got Christmas Story, It's a Wonderful Life, all that fun stuff. So check it out. I'd really appreciate it. And thanks so much, and happy Halloween, everybody. Bye.
Happy Halloween.